This video is the second in the series about color scopes and color correction. In this lesson, we will look at an explanation of the scopes, as well as a back to basics about color, and finally a workflow of how to correct using the scopes. To get the best out of color correction, you need to use the video scopes. They can be time consuming, but if you want a perfect result, then the video scopes will be able to color correct and show you in a mathematical and visual way how your colors should be. We can now come up to the viewer display and show video scopes. And there's our video scopes on the left hand side. And currently we're looking at the histogram. Let's just go through what we can choose. We can choose histogram, vector scope and waveform. These are the two that you will use the most. Then within whichever one of those you're using, you can look at the Luma. And the Luma is essentially showing your black and white. Or your dark and light in this case. So the dark or the blacks are on the left hand side and the whites are on the right hand side. So you can see that there's a peak of black there, which will represent the boat here. And there is some midtones of sea that's represented with these colors here. So that's the sea, that's the sky, and there are the whites of the sails. Or you can just look at it as an RGB parade, and that shows you the reds that are in the sea, the greens that are in the sea, and the blues that are in the sea. Now let's have a look at the waveform. We'll come back to the vector scope in a moment. Just to quickly explain these, the waveform shows you your blacks and whites and greys. The vector scope is for your color. So we'll go to the waveform since we want to look at blacks and whites first. And if we look at this clip here, we can see that we have in the blacks some blacks below in the super blacks. In other words, this is an area where you should not have any color, just like you should not have any whites in the super white. And broadcast safe is this line here. We could also look at this as an RGB parade. And there's your blues, there's the greens, and there's the reds. And in essence, what you're doing by color matching is matching these three panes together. But we'll come to that. So let's leave it in the Luma for the moment, because we're going to cover the black and white. What we need to do is to reduce some of the whites. It's too bright. As we bring that down now, you can see the whites have met this line. And this will also affect it. But this is affecting the midtones. And we can see that the blacks are a little bit too black. So we need to bring this up so that those now are on here. We can now decide what to do with the midtones, and maybe to get them in the middle, we can just reduce the midtones a little. So that's selected the black and white. If we now look in the RGB parade, we can see that we need some more red in there, and we need to reduce some of the blue, though naturally it is blue because it's a sea scene. So we need to increase some of the reds. So when we go to color correction here, we can look at the different colors. Now the white, because it is white, has more color in it than the midtones or the blacks. So we would look at the whites first and try and move those to have more red, and we're balancing it a little. So the example is to get between these 2 points. So that's a more realistic color there. If we wanted to match that now with this one, we can copy that and paste it into this one. So we can either go Command Option V, and that will paste those tones in there, or Command Z. We could go Shift Command V, and then we have the choice of putting color in and not changing any of the other effects. Let's go back to basics. And if we bring into our timeline this black and white image with some grayscale in here, if we're looking now in the waveform monitor under Luma, we can see the black at the edge here, that's the black from there to there, and the black at this edge, that's the black from there to there. This is pure white, and it goes from 0 through to 100% white. And you'll see that that white then travels through to about this point, and then gradually comes down here, and then drops down. That's the grayscale. And grayscale is, or black and white, is what we can review when we're looking at the waveform monitor under Luma. We can also look at this under RGB, but in this case, because it's black and white, all of the reds, all of the greens, and all of the blues are going to be exactly the same because of white is made up of those three colours. If we look at the vector scope though, we can see that all of the colours, black through to white, is in one spot, as if it were pierced right through the centre. So it's white on top and black at the bottom. Incidentally, this line here is to represent skin tones, and we'll look at that a little bit later, but your skin tones should always fit in there. Now we've looked at that image, let's have a look at how some other images show in the waveform. So we'll go back to the waveform, we'll select Luma, and if we look in here at this image on the Sydney Harbour, we can see that we have the 0 black at the bottom and the whites at the top. Now, as we've looked at a little through here now already, we know that if we go to the color correction now and to the exposure, we can reduce some of those blacks, bring them down, and we know that we can bring some of the whites down so that it's not so bright. This is now a much sharper image. So the procedure is, first of all, we'll take this back using the curly arrow to the original. Your procedure when you're working with color correction is first to come to the histogram, and you want to make sure that your blacks are at the 0 point. If we look in there, that's the black, and it should be on here. So looking at that very bottom scale there, as we move this black up, then it should be there. That's the black. Then we come to the waveform, and looking at the waveform in Luma, we want to make sure that the blacks are touching the 0, and they are. We want to bring the whites down a little, and we can lift the midtones or drop them, depending on how the image is, to give some depth to the image. Now if we look at the vector scope will show us our colours. And now when we look in here, we can see that we have a really bright yellow there, and that's that bright yellow here. The rest of it is all within midtones in the centre, black through to white. Remember, that's what happens to midtones. This lesson has shown how to use scopes for the main type of colour correction. The next video will look at correcting skin tones